restart that with the audio because it's come unplugged. What channel is that one, Soph?
TikTok. We're back on now though on all channels. We just had a bit of an overexposure on Facebook.
Okay. So shout out from TikTok. Can you hear my audio if I'm further back now? Can you hear the audio okay? 1, 2. Sometimes when it unplugs and replugs, it doesn't come through as good. Thanks for bearing with us on the live stream. If you've got questions, put it in the comments below and we'll get to answering those. If you stay with us for a second, we'll show you how to open a hive with our superlifter invention, even if you've got 2 7 frames full of honey on top.
TikTok saying all good now.
Excellent.
Yep, and Facebook and YouTube are all not looking like a white cloud anymore.
Okay, have a look at this. This is beautiful. The honey's just absolutely pouring out. Isn't that gorgeous? It's a mesmerising thing to just watch the honey just pour out of the hive. Even 10 years in now, seeing this weekly, I still love just to watch the honey pour out. There's something magical about it. As said, we'll put that cover on because we are going to walk away. So while we're doing our beekeeping, that'll stop the bees from jumping in the jar. So I'm going to wander up here now and we'll make sure our smoke is still going. I did light it up earlier and there we go. Lots of good smoke in your hands. If you're going gloveless, if you're new to beekeeping, wear your gloves, protect yourself when you're near a hive. Some hives can be quite protective and quite aggressive. And also make sure you're putting on your bee suit, making sure all the zips are done up. If you're wearing a long bee suit, pay attention to the bit around your ankles as well, and the Velcro over the top like that. I've got the Clear View hood on today, and sometimes in the more rainy weather you can get a bit of fogging, so with the Clear View we also offer the mesh as well, so you can choose. So this is a 7 frame and it's got a double brood. Now it's been raining, so we've got a little bit of wood swelling here. Hang on 1 second. There we go. You can get tight as wood expands in the rain. Now you can see a whole lot of capped honey there, which is good. So we'll be expecting a little bit of weight as we go over. So the next thing to do is to have a think about which way you want to tip the hive, because in this case we could go this way or we could go this way. Now if you've got a choice, going away from the entrance is a bit less disturbance for the bees, but it doesn't really matter. It more you're thinking about whether there's an obstacle in the way. If you had a fence here, you'd have to go this way or vice versa. Okay, next we're just going to grab our superlifter out of the bag like this, and spreading your hands apart, that's number 1. Then you're walking up to the hive. Do make sure that top boxes are latched together. Then you're lifting the brackets up like that, making sure they're engaged. And as I lift this, you'll notice it's already opening the hive for you. See that? And that takes away that pain point of having to chisel away. And it's often quite an awkward thing to chisel your boxes apart. That does it without you even having to think about it. Now, double boxes can be heavy, so we really do recommend putting 1 or 2 of these handles on, which go onto the same load point screws here. So the way they go on is there's a little notch there, goes over the screw, and you simply wind that on like that, and there you have a nice strong handle for your lift. And you can go ahead and put one on the other side. 1 or 2 is good. If you there we go, just got to set this making sure that goes in there. And again, we're just screwing this lovely brass wing nut in to firmly attach it to the hive, making sure it's nice and solid like that. Now at this point, I still haven't used my hive tool, but it's good to have it handy in case it's not lifting there. But that is doing a fine job of lifting. Again, systems check, checking that these points are locked. Otherwise, your hive could tip over. The other point of interest, if you're doing this for the first time, set this into the upper position. That'll just be a little bit easier because the box will stop a little bit earlier. And then away you go. So with those handles, it makes it quite easy to lift. You've got balance point here. Once you've got that, you can step down the side of the hive and it'll rest like that, ready for you to do your beekeeping. Beautiful. Let's have a look in here and see what is going on. So that just makes it so much easier than wrestling these two boxes off. It's really getting a lot of positive feedback. I didn't expect quite so much positive feedback, but we really are getting an amazing amount of positive feedback with people writing in saying, you've made it possible for me to do beekeeping again, I was about to retire, and so on. But even if you're fit and strong, it's still so much help, because if you're going through a lot of hives, even if you're fit and strong, it really does save you quite a lot of back-breaking work. Any questions coming in, Trace?
Yes, Peter, we've got some people tuning in from Planet Films and saying they've got friends with traditional hives and they'd always wanted to speak Flow Hive. So their question was, what's the difference between a Flow Hive and a traditional beehive?
Okay, there are a few differences. We've based our Flow Hive on the same size of boxes as the Langstroth, so they're the same. So if you like, this is the same as a conventional Langstroth hive. And what we've gone and done is add our harvesting technology. The flow frames that my father and I spent a decade developing are in the top box here, which is basically a whole extracting room condensed into a single box. So it saves a room in your house, a whole lot of mess, a whole lot of sticky boxes sitting around waiting to go back on hives, a whole decapping line, a centrifuge, all the paraphernalia and equipment and mess that goes along with it. It's all built into here. And you can see that harvesting right there where we started. We've already got a nice full jar out of that frame while we've been over here doing something else. So that is the main difference, is we have the harvesting built right into the hive. So let's just take another look at that. So that is very, very different. It was very disruptive when we launched, got a lot of attention now 10 years ago, and here we are 10 years in, still harvesting honey from our flow hives and continuing to innovate in beekeeping. So here we have the honey pouring out. While we've been beekeeping over there, it's filled up that jar. If we leave it a bit longer, we'll probably get to up here, and you get a different flavour per frame. So many say that the honey from a flow hive tastes better. Now that's not what we set out to do, but we get so much feedback from university studies to show that the honey has more floral notes from a flow hive. And we put it down to the honey hasn't touched any machinery or equipment. It's just flowed straight out and into your jar. So every time you spin honey through the air in fine threads in a centrifuge, you're exposing it to a lot of air. It's hitting a metal centrifuge, which it's reacting with, and every step along the way, you're losing those fine floral notes. So this is as direct as it gets, aside from just chomping on some honeycomb straight out of the hive. Many say that's what it tastes like, chewing on fresh honeycomb straight from the hive, yet we've achieved it with honey ready for the table. Here's the frame we've just harvested. You can see the bees are just going about their business. They're walking around on the capping going, hang on a second, the honey's drained out from beneath our feet, and some of them are starting to chew away They'll chew away, recycle that capping, rebuild the cells, start filling them with nectar again, and the whole process starts again. So that's the main difference of a conventional Langstroth and a Flow Hive is our flow frames. We've also gone and added a bunch of other innovations like a adjustable hive stand built into the base. Now that's something that's not usual either. So you can adjust each corner, which makes it easier to level your hive in your garden. And you've got ant guards here to, you can fill them with oil or white grease, Vaseline, to stop the ants getting up onto your hive. And then the windows are really useful as well, because you can look into the hive, see when the honey's ready, and then harvest it in this gentle way. And they're really useful also just to get a gauge on bee numbers and whether it's time to split your hive or whether it's just hot and the bees are hanging out. Using the window view and the entrance view, you can really understand a level deeper than having just a conventional Langstroth hive with no windows on it. Then we've got a pest management tray down here, which has a screen bottom board, has ventilation control, has the ability to catch the hive beetles or count the mites under the tray. And we've got levels built into the side of the hive to help you get your hive levels for when the bees are building naturally drawn comb, or to get your nice honey harvesting angle here for harvesting your honey. So we've gone and put a whole lot of innovation into the hive to build a whole extracting room into your beehive, and then some more bells and whistles to make beekeeping easier. That's the short answer. But the beautiful thing is, now this is its footprint. You can keep bees and harvest honey taking up this much space on your rooftop, your balcony, or in your backyard, and you no longer need a whole processing line. So it's become very popular around the world because not only is it easier, it takes up less space, and you don't need all of that conventional equipment. Let's get back to our hive that's open over here. Now this is a new innovation, the superlifter, if you haven't seen it before. When you're looking after the brood nest in the bottom of the hive, you need to take the top boxes off. So we've designed this nifty contraption that you can click onto the hive, open it up easily, and get into beekeeping. So here we are, let's pull the frame out and have a look what's going on while you think of your next questions.
Thanks, Seeds. Now, a couple of people are asking, Cedar, is this got a double brood box? And if so, how come you're running 2 brood boxes on this hive?
So we're running 2 brood boxes here just to show you. It's common in the colder areas of the world, so we want to be able to show you that superlifter works when you've got 2 brood boxes. So that's the reason why we're running it. Generally, we like to run a single one. It's quite climate specific and also beekeeper specific. Some beekeepers like to just run a single brood box, others like to run a double. It really just depends on your strategy, but it is much more common in those colder regions to run either a deep and a medium for a brood box, or 2 deeps for a brood box. And that just will help your bees get through a long cold winter. Okay, so there we have a frame of pollen. Now that was a surprise. I was expecting to see brood in the middle. So straight away I'm going to have to look deeper into this hive to check what's going on and make sure we have a laying queen. Pollen right in the middle of the brood nest is unusual. So I'm going to put that frame aside. Now I don't have my frame rests at the ready. So I'm just going to lean it up on the hive, quick check, make sure the queen's not on there. Now this is an older frame, you can tip it right on its side, but when it's freshly drawn, you want to be careful of doing that if you're not using foundation. Now, that's another benefit of the Flow Hive, you can choose not to use foundation in the brood box because these frames are never going to be in a centrifuge. And you can just let the bees draw the comb perfectly natural without having to worry about putting in the foundation if you don't want to. Of course, our frames do accommodate foundation, whether it be wax, and wire, or you could use a plastic foundation if you wish. I like to just keep it perfectly natural down here in the brood box and let the bees do their thing. Any more questions coming in?
Yep, Seeds. CC's wondering, they just received their nuke last weekend and got 5 frames. Just wondering, is there any time that they would remove those frames provided with the nuke?
Generally you cycle out frames after some time, so you'll find after a few seasons you will have cycled out those frames. So this old dark one we were looking at here, today I'm going to put it on the edge. And the reason why I put it on the edge is I wait till there's no brood in it and then I'll cycle it out. Or I could choose to cycle it out right now, because if I have a close look and check that there's no eggs down the cells, maybe it's time to get rid of that old waxy dark wax comb. Now, having a look at this one, but it doesn't matter to mix it up. If you want to run foundation and naturally drawn in the same box, the bees won't care either way. So you've got brood here, just a little patch of brood. Now I'm going to look down the cells and see if we've got any eggs. So I'm holding it up to the light. I'm seeing larvae. So that's showing in the last 11 days the brood is in its larvae stage. So there has to be a queen laying at least in the last 7 days. It's not a particularly good laying pattern. We like to see a whole lot of brood right across the frame on a good laying queen. Now we are spread across 2 boxes here, so it's possible that the bulk of the brood nest is in the box above, which we can use the superlifter to lift off the next box as well. So here we go. Again, we're seeing patchy brood and a bit of pollen. Now, the clear view does help you see the bee eggs down the cells. If you're someone who needs to wear glasses, wear your glasses, because seeing the tiny little grains of rice down the cells can be a challenge sometimes. Getting the sunlight right down in the bottom of the cell will help. So I'm seeing eggs down these cells here, so I'm satisfied that we do, and it looks like an egg in the bottom of each cell. So I'm happy. Looks like we do have a laying queen, but perhaps they changed their queen because it looks like there's been a bit of a disruption in the cycle, where you're just seeing a little tiny patch of worker brood. So I'd flag this hive as one to look out for, make sure we get a good laying pattern and consistent numbers. Okay. Any more questions?
Yes, I do. How much honey do you expect to get out of that place?
So in this area, the short answer is we could probably harvest all the frames a couple of times on average. Having said that, that's 1 frame of honey, that big jar there. So that would make, out of a 7 frame hive, you could have 21 kilograms of honey average in this area when we're not moving our hives around. Commercial operators will move their hives to the flowers and get a much higher honey yield. As backyardies, it will depend on what's flowering in your direct vicinity as to how much honey you'll harvest. And in the springtime, it can get really exciting, where you can harvest all of your frames and 2 weeks later they're all full again, and you can harvest again and 2 weeks later they're all full again. And that can get very exciting. You can store a lot of honey, but conversely you can get a season that's just poor. The flowers don't flower, perhaps there was drought, perhaps there was fire, perhaps your colony wasn't that strong at the time when the flowers were plentiful. So, like any kind of farming, seasonality will really affect it, the weather will really affect it, and your genetics will affect it, and a bit of luck as well. You might have a pest or disease issue coming in and really slowing your hive down. So it is an incredible amount of honey for an insect to make, though, whichever way you look at it. A whole bucket full of honey from a hive is just incredible, I think.
Great. So it's just getting a few people. I think your mic might be rubbing against your jacket, so we might need a bit of wardrobe.
Okay. There we go. I'll hold it out like this.
Right when you're standing still.
Yeah. Don't bend down. Hard to beekeep without bending. Let us,
You might have to put up with that.
let us
Okay.
know how it's going.
Let's keep looking through. So here's another frame of pollen. So very light on brood down here. As said, we'll be looking back through this hive in a week or two, making sure we've got plenty of brood. Right now, it's a bit thin on the ground. Okay. I'll be interested to see what's going on in the top box, so we might put this one back together. We'll jump up to this box, have a good look in there and see what's going on. Any more questions?
Cedar, when you've got a double brood box like this, which box is the queen usually in?
Okay, so that's if you often keep 2 brood boxes, chime in and let us know. But a general rule of thumb is you're looking where the most bees are. So if you find they're a bit thin down here and they're hard pack up here, then it's more likely to be the brood nest is happening up here around the queen in the next box up. Some say the sunnier side of the hive is more likely to have the queen in the morning. So this side of the hive has been warmer, so you might find the queen over there. But she could be anywhere. There's an excluder here, so she shouldn't be in the very top box. She's going to be somewhere in these 2. That's one of the reasons why I like to keep just a single brood. It's much easier to find the queen if you need to.
Deborah's wondering, Cedar, how do the flow hives hold up during long, cold winter months?
Okay, they're pretty much a Langstroth hive, and Langstroth hives have got a long history in those very cold areas. Now, we have a gabled roof on top, which adds another area of insulation, which is helpful. There's one area that's not disputed as to whether to insulate or not, and that's up here in the roof area. But in those cold regions, people like to take it a step further and take advantage of the cavity under this gabled roof and put some styrofoam or some extra insulation under the roof in order to make sure that inner cover isn't getting cold. What you don't want is condensation on the underside of the inner cover dripping onto your bees in cold times. So we have flow hives right up in Nebraska. We have them in the colder areas of Europe. We have them in Canada. We have them all over the world in very cold places, and it's well proven that they work well in the cold areas as well. I'm going to top up this smoker. It's getting a little light on.
Cedar, you talked about the cold climate before. JJP is wondering, do you get more honey all year round in a warmer climate like in Australia, say compared to the UK?
Chime in, let us know how much you get in your area. Now, it really does depend, and it will depend here. For instance, we get honey all through the winter. 2 hours inland you don't, so very location specific. Now in Canada they brag that they can fill a whole 10 frame super in a day when things are in full flight. Hard to believe. The fastest we ever see it here is a week. So it's very location specific, and what you'll find in those colder regions is the honey season is condensed into a shorter time in the year, where here it runs in dribs and drabs all year round. So if you're onto it and you're harvesting when the honey's full, you may just find you get a lot of honey out of your flow hive in those colder regions.
Right. I had a little comment, Snake Doctor, saying that he had a lot of bees die in his flow hive. Not quite sure what's going on there, and just had trouble cleaning the Flow Hive. And I don't know whether they're talking about the flow frames or the boxes, so it might be good to talk about how you do clean those.
Okay, it'd be interesting to know more about what the hive looked like after your bees disappeared or died. There's multiple reasons why that can happen. One is you could get a pesticide kill if your bees have gone and sucked on insecticide that's been sprayed onto flowers. Another one is Varroa could have really gotten hold and your colonies died out from stress from that and perhaps viruses that the Varroa brings. Another one is hive beetles could prey on a weak hive when a queen is failing, if she's not present or not laying eggs. Then your hive beetles might take advantage when there's not enough bees to really chase them around and lay lots of eggs, and it can turn into what's called a slime out. So let us know what's happened with your hive, and in terms of cleaning the frames ready to go again, first of all you want to ascertain whether there's any signs of AFB, which will leave a snail trail down the cells, the empty cells in the brood nest. So if you're looking at a dead out, you want to first ascertain whether there's any signs of AFB. Assuming that's not the case, you can go ahead and prepare your equipment for a new colony. Now, when it comes to the brood frames, it's much like any Langstroth frames. You're cleaning them up, ready to go again. If they're naturally drawn, you're cutting away all the wax and just keeping the wooden surrounds. If the foundation, you'll be preparing foundation in your frames. And with the flow frames themselves, we've found the best way to wash them is with a pressure washer. Either leave them flat down on a paved surface or lean them up against a wall so they're supported. Set them in open or harvest position and then blast down the cell lines with the pressure washer to clean a whole lot of that old wax off. And if you connect a hot water hose to your pressure washer, it'll work even better. And let them dry. They don't have to be completely clean. The bees will do the final job for you. And when you get your colony back in there and it's time to put your super on, you can go ahead and put those flow frames back on again, and hopefully you'll get a good strong colony that survives. Okay. Now I'm just making space to put this frame back in again. Now I did say we were going to cycle that one out. Now I should just show you how to do that. I'm going to check, because naturally drawn has an advantage when you're trying to cycle out some old comb. We could choose to do that now with this old comb here. It has got pollen resources, but I notice there's plenty of pollen in the hive, so I don't mind taking some of it away. And I am looking down the cells and I can see some larvae in this region, little white grubs. So I don't want to orphan them from the hive or they'll die. So what I'm first going to do is, rather than with naturally drawn, you can just cut out the comb, which I was going to show you, and then put this straight back in. It saves that processing later in the shed phase. One advantage. Now, because I've noticed a little bit of brood in there, I'm going to put this frame on the edge so that next time I'm in here, it won't have brood in it, or it's unlikely to on the edge, and we can then show you how to cut that wax out. So I'm going to move these over just by levering my hive tool against the edge of the box. Like that, or like this. Being careful not to squash the bees as the frames come together. The smoke is useful for clearing bees out of the way, so you can smoke this edge here, get all the bees out of the way, and then push your end bars together.
Cedar, just while you're using the smoker there, Five is asking, what are you using to make the smoke? Like, what's in the smoker?
I tend to use whatever I've got around. In this case, it's just some sugarcane garden mulch. Pine needles are a great easy one to light. Some people use cardboard if they've got nothing else around, and or you could use bark from trees. Some people like to dry out old hessian sacks by hanging them on the fence for a while. Anything that'll burn, just steer away from like things with heavy print, so magazines and things, you wouldn't use that paper in the smoker because that would add a whole lot of chemicals you don't want to your hive. Okay, we've been talking, but let's see if we can close this hive up and get to the top box. I'm just pressing the frames together, putting any excess space on either side. There we go. And that just keeps your bee space correct. So that's an important thing to do, especially if you're using naturally drawn comb. Now next I want to make sure this area is clear here, because when I close the hive up, the box is going to land here only. So it's the only place I have to look for the initial close to make sure we're not squashing a whole lot of bees. Now I can add a bit of smoke here to get them moving away, or I can use a bee brush. And I'm also looking up here, and we seize the moment where there's no bees there, and we're simply closing the hive like this. Out of the way, there we go. And lining that up. Now you've got this very controlled way to close a hive. Normally when you're holding the box up in the air, you're trying to dump it back on, and you can't help but squash a whole lot of bees here. You do have the opportunity, if you want to do this in a nice, gentle, controlled way as you close the hive up by adding a bit of smoke, using the brush as you slowly lower it down. So in a really busy colony, it can get difficult to find that moment where there isn't many bees left. So I'm collapsing my pole leg now, and I use this as a handle. I brush the bees out of the way. Make sure I'm not squashing them as I close the hive back up. And that's a nice, gentle, easy way to close your hive. Now if we want to open this box and have a look at the next one, then what we'll need to do is unlatch our little brass latches here, both sides, and we could either choose to move the handles up to the top box, or we could take them off altogether, because a single box for me is quite easy to roll over without the handles. But some people like to use the handles for single boxes as well, depending on, I guess, how much muscle you have in your arms.
Seda, could you use another honey box on top of this one? Can you run the superlifter with 4 boxes, is the question.
No, we've designed it to lift a maximum of 2 10-frame deeps and potentially a gabled roof full of honey. Beyond that, you're on your own, you'll run into stability issues, and we don't recommend it. However, if you are going to attempt that kind of thing, you'll need another support stand. This stand is designed, and where it rests on the hive is set up for 2 boxes. So you'll need like a chair or a pile of boxes out the front to catch a taller stack if you're attempting to do that. Not that I recommend it. No. So here's your lifter again. Let's show you how to open the hive again. Step number 1, you grab these handles, move it apart like this. Step 2, it's written on the lower bracket there. You're putting them onto the hive. Step 3 is written on the hand grips. You're going up and over, making sure they are over the load point screws. Step 4 is written here. That's the lifting the pole leg, keeping an eye that everything's engaged, and that's opening the hive for you. Then you're rolling your pole leg around, setting up your stand. In this case, I'm going to use the 2-stage telescope like that, making sure it's all the way up and the pole's all the way in. Now you're ready to roll this box over like that and start your beekeeping. So here we are. Let's have a look and see if there is brood in the top box.
Cedar, would you ever do this without a bee suit?
Look, I have done, but complacency like that usually ends up with lots of stings, so I tend to wear my bee suit. Every now and then you get carried away and learn again that it's good to wear a bee suit. There's nothing to prove. You don't need to be some kind of bee suitless hero. So protect yourself by wearing a bee suit and gloves too if you're new to beekeeping. Okay, I can see a bit of honey in here. So they're storing honey up here. First of all, I'm going to go sideways to loosen up some frames, just like that. First one's always the hardest to get out. Choosing a frame that looks like you can lift it easily is important. Then using the J end, you're rolling the frame up like this. And away we go, lifting up the frame. And interested to see whether we have a brood nest up here, the second box, and we do. So we've got a bit more brood here, a bit patchy looking. It's ideal when you've got brood all the way across your frame and you can see that the colony is going to boom. It's possible that nectar was scarce, the queen slowed down her laying, or possible that they changed the queen and there was a break in the laying. Another thing of interest is the honey. I can see piercings in the caps of the honey, showing that the bees have gotten a bit hungry and they're starting to uncap and use some of that honey to stay alive. Same on the other side, a patchy brood pattern. Beautiful. Keep the questions coming in. We've got time for a few more as we do a brood inspection, and then we'll get back to our little honey harvest we started with.
Great. Cedar, Home's wondering, can you paint the outside of the box in a spa marine varnish? Are there pros and cons to using a varnish?
This hive is actually a type of varnish. I think this one's actually a water-based though. It's written on the inside of the window cover which one this is, and I think it's, here it is, Intergrain Exterior Ultra Clear. Now, that's a new one they've brought out. The issue with varnishes is it can look great for a while, but then the mildew can get underneath the varnish, which then is a lot harder to deal with. You've got to get the varnish off before you can get rid of that mildew. Whereas if you're using some of the decking coats that are thinner, it's easy to rub them back and go again. It's always a challenge keeping wood looking like wood outdoors if it's fully exposed to the elements. It's always trying to turn back into grey wood and eventually decompose, right? But keeping it up off the ground will make it last a lot longer, and keeping it protected. The deck coats are really designed to keep wood looking like wood as long as it can outdoors, so that's the ones we tend to go for. But this one's holding up quite nicely, a new one by Intergrain.
Seeds, I'm just going to shout out, I know people on Instagram and TikTok, I'm sorry, we're a bit overheated, so you probably can't hear me anyway, but we're on Facebook and YouTube if you can hear us at all. Our cameraman Ben's just so hot, he's just like heating up our cameras, I think.
Ben the Bender. Okay. Let's just have a look at a couple more frames. We'll put this hive back together as we answer a couple more questions. Sorry about that on some of our channels. As said, jump across to Facebook or YouTube if you're finding the stream patchy.
So just with that queen excluder you've taken off, Jane's just wondering, what's the best way to clean the wax from that queen excluder?
Okay, if you want to clean wax from a queen excluder, then there's a few ways to go about that. One is you can just put it on a flat surface and use your hive tool. Now this is all honey pretty much. I can feel the weight of it. I can see the nectar coming in. That's a good sign that the bees have got a nectar flow. The size of the cells is super interesting too. So have a look at this. We've got all drone sized cells here. the further away from the brood nest they are, the more likely they are to build larger size cells, and that's why the flow frames are designed with a larger, close to 6mm size cell to mimic what bees will naturally do when they only want to use it for honey storage, not for brood.
Got a few people just asking where to purchase, when will the hybrid be back, also about the medium boxes. Any of those questions, contact our fabulous customer support team, and they'll definitely get you sorted with all of those answers to those questions. We've got someone saying, Cedar, you were talking about using paper in the smoker, and Clinton was wondering, could you use the paper that comes wrapped with the Flow Hive? That's got a little bit of print on it.
It's got a little bit of print. Steer away if you can. Often beekeepers will use some plain cardboard, so you might like to use some of the box that was packaging. I tend to just go for natural smoker fuels like garden mulch and leaves. That way you know there's no nasties in it, no glue and things like that. But you could, certainly is common for beekeepers to use cardboard in their smoker.
Tyler's wondering, Cedar, how do you compact a hive beetle infestation?
Okay, if you find your hive beetles are taking over your hive, let's say your colony's got weak for some reason, it's usually a secondary problem, maybe your queen's not present, she died, or she's stopped laying, she's run out of sperm, and the bees haven't superseded her and the colony numbers are dropping. The hive beetles go, yee-haw, there's no bees chasing me around anymore, I can start laying thousands of eggs. Then you might get maggots from the hive beetles worming their way through the brood comb, damaging the larvae, turning the honey sour, and it's all a bit of an issue that can lead to a slime out in the end of your colony. So if I find a colony like that, where you're starting to see those slimy wet patches on the frame, and it's looking like the bee numbers are really low, then I'll strip the hive right back to just the bare essentials of 3 or 4 brood frames in a single box, and take all the rest away, put it ideally in the freezer for 3 days to kill any hive beetle eggs or larvae. When the hive's back on its feet, you can put them back on again. So when I say strip them back to just 3 or 4 brood frames, so you might choose 3 or 4 that have brood in them, get rid of all the pollen, all the honey, and just put blank frames on the edges here. So it naturally drawn, you're just cutting out the comb and chucking that away, burning it. Or if you're using foundation, you'll be putting fresh frames in with foundation on the edges, and that'll give your hive the best chance. I've saved multiple hives from slime out quite late stage from doing that technique. But time is of the essence. If you notice slimy wet patches, there's a whole lot of hive beetle maggots falling into the tray below, act quickly, get in there, strip everything away, leaving just a bare minimum brood nest, and your hive will likely recover from that. Okay, there's one frame here to go back in. Using the smoke is a good way to clear bees out of the way, so you don't squash them as you put the frame back in. Slowly, slowly going down, making sure you're not having areas of comb pressing on to another section of comb. Otherwise, the hive beetles can take advantage of that area where the bees can't get to them because the wax is in the way. I've seen strong colonies succumb to hive beetles from that, where the combs have been pressed together for some reason and the hive beetles go, yee-haw, let's lay it away. Okay, the hive's back together now. We need to put our excluder back on. We had a question earlier about cleaning it. I would normally just scrape some wax off, or you can just leave it there. It is a reservoir for the bees. They do recycle wax around the hive, so it's a little bit up to you on whether you want to clean it or just leave it. I tend to just leave it mostly. unless it's really waxy and propolisy. Adding a bit of smoke to try and get the bees to clear out of the way. Jiggling your excluder down. Now seize the moment when there's not many bees, brush them away, and you can go ahead and close your hive again. Again, it's landing on the back here. Line it up, and now use the nice gentle closure to get the bees out of the way. Using a smoker, your bee brush, you really have a moment to brush the bees out of the way and slowly, gently, in a controlled way, close the hive, which is really different to how it's been done conventionally. So I collapse that pole leg, and then I have this as a handle like this, and I can get around, brush bees out of the way, smoke them out of the way, and slowly close it like that. And there you are. Simple little gadget we've invented. Super helpful whether you've got Langstroth hives or Flow hives. And there it is, ready to put away.
So Elena's just wondering, can you use that on the hives?
So Apumay hives are a plastic construction, a bit like an esky. I think you'd have to design your own brackets to connect to them in order to give you these load point screws. I haven't had a close look, but I imagine rubbing them into the plastic box wouldn't be strong. So you need to design a metal bracket with multiple fixtures in order to give you that load point screw position. Okay, making sure you're closing up the windows. You don't want a whole lot of sunlight getting in there and melting the wax. Okay, let's go back and see how our jar of honey is going. It looks nice and full now. It's managed to fill up while we've been busy beekeeping, which is a beautiful thing. It really has changed harvesting honey. You can let it harvest by itself, or you can enjoy it here with the family, watching the honey pour out of the hive. Opening up our cover, and there we have a beautiful jar of honey. I'm going to close off the flow now just by going back to a 90. I'm pulling the key out. Now I'm sliding in the top slot and turning it again. A little tip, leave that for a minute or two while you're packing up, just to push all of the bits of comb back into the cell form position. If you just do a quick close, the wax and propolis is such that it might bounce back up a little bit. It will cause you problems later with excess wax constricting the flow path. Okay, a little hot swap with that one. You can either enjoy the spoils or you can leave it on the edge of the jar like that. There you have a beautiful jar of honey, and that's a single frame. Isn't it incredible that the bees can produce that much honey? Each little bee in its short life as a worker might only produce 1/4 teaspoon of honey, so don't waste it. Honey's a precious thing. Taking that out, we're putting the cap in like that, and all we're doing is closing the covers, and away we go. Job is done. Thank you very much for watching, and also thank you to all of those that are really chiming in and helping each other answer questions. It's wonderful to see a community on a global scale helping each other and answering questions that might be for really cold climates or might be location specific. And also, if you are the type of person who wants some video training content, we have at the beekeeper.org a really high quality video training course which is made to take you from square one right through to even a deep scientific knowledge in beekeeping. It's free to try, and it's also an amazing fundraiser. And we've supported countless projects with funds raised from the beekeeper.org, and we've planted 1.5 million trees so far in high quality ecosystems in order to provide what the pollinators need, and that's forage to go and forage on. And of course all the other species that benefit from having more of our ecosystem that everything depends on put back in place. Thanks for watching. Tune in. Let us know what you'd like us to cover next week, and we'll be back with another show and tell.